Hello all and happy holiday weekend to you. Welcome back to Killer Shrew Fans Killer Toy Reviews. Today we are going to be taking a look at the first CollectA figure from that mini zoo unboxing video I did a while back. Why now? Well, because I'm finally done procrastinating it, that's why. I thought I would start with the only 2020 model I picked up in that order. It's this, the CollectA Bajadasaurus. Bajadasaurus, tomato. I'll probably do both throughout this review. No point in correcting me in the comments, it's already been recorded. Anywho, this is a relatively new dinosaur on the scene, being just announced in February of last year. It's a fascinating new discovery, and we can always rely on CollectA to hit the ground running with these new species and pump out a model for the following year's lineup. This Bajadasaurus was a welcome and exciting addition to their line, especially for me, as the species became one of my favorites upon its release to the public. But for our first model of the animal, how does it hold up? Is it worth getting your first Bajadasaurus right away, or should you just wait until another company starts putting out their version? Let's find out. So starting off at the head of this Bajadasaurus, as we usually do, CollectA have sculpted this dinosaur in an open mouth position. No teeth in there, just a pink interior, which is always kind of a shame to me. I get it though, it's none too big of a head, so sculpting in teeth might have been a challenge with this one. The skull has a nice shape, and even with its small surface area, it does have some decent levels of detail. It certainly isn't as crisp as the detailing on the rest of the body, but it is there, you just have to look. The eye is that simple jet black coloration that CollectA always seems to do, and I never really like that. Just feels way too simple and denies the model some life and character, if you ask me. You can see that just past the base of the skull, the start of those wicked looking curved neck spines, which are the meat and potatoes of this animal. You can see that CollectA have given them a sort of keratin antler appearance, which I always appreciate seeing some sort of texture on these sorts of features, so that's great. They are soft to the touch, so it is play safe, and you don't have to worry about pieces breaking if it takes a tumble off of your shelf, which is always a plus. The spikes continue in a dual row until just above the hips, where they meet and continue down the tail in a single line of short bumps. As far as the rest of the model goes, I'll give CollectA credit. The texture here in general is a lot more subtle than some of their other models. There are plenty of round scale details, osteoderms, folds of skin around the gut and limbs, everything you expect in a dinosaur model. The tail is nice and long and has a graceful curved end to it. All in all, a very well done sculpt. I feel like CollectA tends to over-sculpt a lot of their models. I don't know if over-sculpt is the right terminology, but there has always been something about the carved out uniformity of CollectA's finer details that has always put me off. This figure is a refreshing departure from that, but aside from that, there isn't much else to say about it. I think the finer details are by and large better than usual, and I don't think there's anything necessarily detracting from the sculpt, but for whatever reason, it doesn't stand out to me as fantastic or something I need to gush about. I think that has to do primarily with the paint, but we'll get into that later. The appendages have some nice musculature, and I already mentioned the lovely folds of skin around the joints. Both the front and the back feet feature the proper foot shape with the appropriate digits, the front thumb claw and the hoof shape, the 3 claws on the back feet. It's all handled quite well. The underbelly, for whatever reason, is the standout to me in terms of the detail. The texture down here feels the most crisp and eye-catching, and it's unfortunate that it's all on the bottom and out of sight. And speaking of bottom, there's the standard blown-out CollectA cloaca, so if that's a detail you think is important, fear not. It has been captured here in all of its dirty glory. I will say I like the pose. CollectA in general does a good job at doing intriguing but not extreme poses for their models. This Bajadasaurus is sculpted with its right arm forward while the other limbs are planted firmly beneath it. I love the downward craning neck. Combined with those spikes, it really gives the model a bristling appearance that takes full advantage of the Bajadasaurus' most distinctive feature. It kind of reminds me of the pose present in the artwork that was released alongside the published findings, and I think it works on many levels. It could be bending its head downward to graze or drink, or with that arm forward, it could be bracing itself into a defense stance. The door is wide open here for some interesting dioramas or photo ops. Heck, if CollectA ever released a miniature version of this, you could have a mother leaning down to feed her hatchling. Sure, the detail on this model is fairly well handled, but for me, The pose is what really makes it shine and brings it to life. So that's all there is to say about the sculpt of this model. Overall, there's plenty of details to go around on a lovely pose, but then we get to the model's biggest problem. I feel a lot of what it has going for it is nearly obliterated by a lackluster and unappealing paint job. There are two things that I always find hit and miss with CollectA. One is the detail. I already mentioned that. Sometimes it's very good, especially for the price point, but the other is the paint jobs, which almost always have some element that detracts from the overall look. For this model, it's just bland, man. I mean, what, you've got a thrilling shade of flesh on the flanks there, and with that sort of skin tone applied to the scaled texture, it really puts in mind images of disease, which is just unfortunate. And then just this flat brown bar that runs across the top and down onto the back. There is some transition to it, but for the most part, it just looks like a block of color. On a positive note, there aren't any random streaks of haphazard paint that CollectA tries to pass off as patterning on this model. But if I'm being honest here, this model might have actually benefited from that. Something. Anything to liven it up. Maybe have the brown dripping downward and a sort of zebra striping, or even if it just, faded into the tan. That would have just helped it to feel a lot less abrupt. What we got is just so simple and ugly that you don't even notice some of the details, which is a shame because I actually think CollectA did achieve a decent balance with their finer sculpting here. If only they had achieved some harmony between the sculpt and the paint, this one could have been a knockout. But enough ranting, let's get into some measurements and comparisons. This Bajadasaurus measures in at roughly 12.5 inches long or 32 centimeters and stands in at just under 3.5 inches tall or 9 centimeters off the ground. For size comparison, here it is next to the recently reviewed CollectA Deluxe T-Rex, which you can see towers over this Bajadasaurus. And next up for comparison, here it is next to the CollectA Styracosaurus, another model that is quite a bit bigger than this small Bajadasaurus. Here it is with the CollectA Carnotaurus, still my personal favorite CollectA figure in my collection, and these two are a bit closer in size to one another. Finally, for CollectA size comparisons, here it is next to the CollectA Enosaurus, the smallest CollectA figure I own, and you can see he can look into the Bajadasaurus's eyes there. Hopefully, if you have any of these CollectA figures, you can get an idea of the size that you can expect from this newbie. Links will be in the description for the figures I have taken a look at on the channel, by the way. But we're not done with comparisons yet. Oh, no. I wanted to bring in some relatives since I don't have any other Bajadasaurus figures for comparisons, with this, being the first one and all. So instead, I'll go ahead and bring in the massive Safari LTD Amargasaurus, and that unit of a figure absolutely dwarfs our subject today. And finally, for comparisons, here it is next to the Carnegie Amargasaurus, and those two are a bit more even in terms of size, as you can see. So there you have it, everyone. That is going to do it for my look at the new for 2020 CollectA Bajadasaurus. Overall, this figure has plenty going for it, and if you're more of a fan of CollectA than I am, then you'll probably be more forgiving of its shortcomings. I think the detail is quite nice for what it is I'm used to seeing from CollectA, and I do want to commend them on their drive to deliver on these models as fast as possible. It is great to see newcomers getting recognition in model form so soon, but at the end of the day, it's about the paint on this one. It is so distractingly simple with unappealing and poorly applied colors that I find myself having a hard time seeing what it is I actually do like about this model. For the price, I guess it's pretty harmless. It's not like you'll be out a chunk of change for an underwhelming figure. But I mean, Safari's prices are pretty similar and they managed to deliver much more appealing color schemes, so I don't know. Maybe it is worth waiting until Safari jumps on this train. Overall, I think if you're hungry for models of a new species, this Bajadasaurus is worth adding to your collection. Just be sure to have it repainted. Anyway, thank you all so much for tuning in to today's review. Be sure to drop a comment down below on your way out, letting me know what you think of this model and if you will be picking it up. As always, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you again for the next one. Take care out there, and have a great holiday weekend. Killer Shrew Fan, out.